They are not going from faith to faith. It's like they totally blank out on what God did for them in the past. Now, the next place they travel to, Elam, they do not complain there because everything's taken care of. They find an oasis in the wilderness. There are 12 wells and there are 70 palm trees. They've got water. No complaining. Well, this is the natural man. Actually, some natural men. Some people, if there's nothing to complain about, then they create something. I mean, people, we talk about people who are complainers. That, no matter what it is, they complain. I should tell you, maybe if somebody heard tell me this story. Ronald Reagan used to love to tell the story, and the reporters hated it because he told it over and over again. They'd have to listen to it all the time, but most of you don't know all Reagan stories. It's a joke he would tell about two little boys, and one was an optimist and one was a pessimist. And so they wanted to do a scientific study to see why the one was so optimistic and why the one was so negative and pessimistic. So they took the optimistic little boy. First they took the pessimist. Took the pessimist first, and they put him in a room filled with toys. And then they had one-way mirrors where, the boy could see a mirror, but they could watch him while he's in this room. And the little kid walks around all the toys, sits down in the middle room and starts crying. It's just a room full of toys, and the kid is in tears. What is the matter with him? So they interview him after the experiment. They say, why were you crying? He says, well, I don't want to touch those toys, they'd break. Okay, so that was the negative little boy. Wouldn't touch the toys because they thought they would break. So they took all the toys out of the room and they put a big pile of manure in the room. And then they took the optimistic kid and they brought him in the room filled with manure. And he runs around and picks up chunks of manure and throws it in the air and hoops and yells and gets excited and jumps in the air. And they're trying to figure this little kid, why are you so excited? He says, well, all this manure around, there must be a pony somewhere. Well, there are people of both types. There are some people in every situation they can see something positive. And there are other people, no matter what the situation, they will find something negative. And they are in this negative syndrome to the end. It's really hard to believe they could be that negative. I will say this about New Testament churches. People naturally in their lives tend to go through periods of negativity. We all do. We have our negative cycles. And in this case, Satan will bring little things to bring it on, to bring the negativity on. Jesus said, blessed are ye that are not offended in me. Offended in me means offended in the church. You're in a local church, the Lord church is doing the work of God. It's not perfect because it's filled with people. That's the only fault it has. But things aren't, something is annoying you, bothering you, and you become negative over it, and then the negativity grows and everything bothers you. I remember once preaching on negativity in a church, and I said, most people leave a church because they can't get along with one person. While I'm doing this, I actually froze my eyes on one person. It says, they leave the church because they can't get along with one person. The person I stared down when I was doing it, I found out after the service, had a man in the congregation who'd been harassing her. And she wanted to leave the church. And I knew nothing about it. When I found out, I went after this guy. But it was that one person she wanted to leave the church about. I wanted him out, not her. Anyways, we go through our negative cycles. In our marriages, we go through negative cycles. Where, something bothers you about your spouse, and then another thing, and you can get incredibly negative. Everybody else thinks they're wonderful, you want to brain them. Okay? This is a normal marriage. Okay? You don't do this all the time, but you do this. So when people get married, you have to tell them, you will go through your negative cycles. Okay? Because you're going to get to know this person. If there's anything that stinks about his flesh, it will annoy you to high heaven. So we have to, so we're watching them in this negative cycle that they can't seem to get out of. This is what's scary about it. But they don't. So, at this point though, everything is fine, so there's no complaining. And really, often pastors do this, trying to patch up problems with people to keep them happy. You can't do it. It can't be done. You have to somehow teach them, can we learn to thank God and praise Him and believe God and believe in His faithfulness even when things are not going right. That's what we need. That's what we need for a successful church, because we will have our times. We will have our seasons. There will always be something to be offended about. It will happen. And this is how they work. So, I'm going to skip something here I discussed. There's a point, I should mention it. I know I'm off here, but I got it in my notes, and I'm just going to mention it here. At this point in the Exodus, we get a promise that is a whole other message I'm not going to talk about tonight, but it is there. And we'll get back on our negative cycle. Well, there we go. Exodus 15:26 saying, if you will diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord your God, and will do what is right in His sight, and will listen to and obey His commandments, and keep all His statutes, I will put none of the diseases upon you, which I brought upon the Egyptians. That's an incredible promise. The illnesses that the Egyptians have, you will not suffer from. The fulfillment for that was the sanitary laws that were taught the people under the law of Moses. They were taught how to, how do I say it? Someone who had leprosy was kept in isolation so it would not spread. They were not allowed to touch, if they touched a dead body, they were unclean for 7 days. They were kept in isolation so they wouldn't carry disease. They had sanitary laws for eating and drinking and bathing. They were actually told you keep a shovel with you, a little shovel, and when you need to go to the bathroom, you go out. That's in the law of Moses. You go outside the camp, you go to the bathroom, and you cover it, you dig a hole, and you bury it. You know, ancient cities could be incredibly filthy places, but the Jews were taught sanitary laws. So if they were paying attention to the whole law of Moses, they would be spared a great number of diseases. Now, I have done this before. I haven't got all the scriptures in front of me. Maybe we'll get to that. We'll look at some of those sanitary laws. But the wisdom of God was in there. And then just the supernatural blessing of God. So, but I'm going to leave that for now. But it is in the scriptures there. There is that promise. They came to Elim, 12 springs of water, 70 palm trees. They camped there by the waters. Everybody's happy. Everybody's a happy camper, literally. Then, second official murmuring, fourth bout of murmuring, since back in Egypt, really. They set out for Elim, and the congregation of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin. By the way, this is where we get the word from. What happened in that wilderness. That's where we get our word sin from. Which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day in the second month that they left the land of Egypt. This is only the second month in the wilderness. In the middle of the month, they are back to complaining. And the whole congregation of Israel murmured against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. Remember, murmuring is, you know what Moses did this time? You know what Aaron did this time? They're up to it again. They're not going to God with the problem. They're not going to Moses with the problem, but they're complaining about Moses. The parallel in the New Testament church, the normal thing to do is, when things go wrong, blame the pastor. You could be the problem, but he'll get blamed. How this happens, I do not know. Pastor Moore puts it this way. You're not happy with life. The pastor presents to you life, so you're not happy with the pastor. That's how he does it. And there is a real correlation. Unhappy people will take target at leadership. And it goes on. It went on here. It's not the only time it's happened in church history. So, they're all murmuring and said, would that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt. Haven't we heard that story before? Is this beginning to sound like an old record to some of you? Yeah. When we sat by the flesh pots and ate bread to the full. For you have brought us out in this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. Well, this is what they're doing. They're running out of food and they're angry. And they're blaming Moses. Nobody is saying, wait a minute. If he can take us through the Red Sea, I think he can feed us too. Nobody is going from faith to faith. Now, the solution here, first of all, what's going on in their mind? Ecclesiastes 7:10. Do not say, why were the old days better than these? Now we have the expression in English, the good old days. But the good old days were not always so good. I'll give you, for instance, I've done this with adults. How many would like to be teenagers again? And yeah, I already see it. No, please, no. I don't want to do that again. No. You see? But in our minds, when things are not going well, we live in the past or the future. And suddenly we could have the most awful past, but we remember some good thing part of it, and it becomes the good old days. Solomon understood that this is part of the human mind. When we are unhappy, the bad old days can suddenly become the good old days. And we'll find something good about them that we wish we had back. So they are doing what Solomon taught. And if Solomon wrote this, I'm sure he knew this example well. This is what they're doing. I can remember being in Puerto Rico as a missionary and getting a little homesick and wishing I had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Well, when I lived in the U.S., I never ate a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and my mother gave them to me all the time. I was kind of hated those things, but I get to Puerto Rico and I want one. This is like them in the wilderness, the good old days. Okay? This is part of what people do dealing with difficult things. If they don't like what's going on, the mind will imagine the good old days, whether they are good or not. And they're doing this. And Ecclesiastes said this, why were the old days better than these? Don't say that. They had their problems too. Now, the provision again does not come through great faith. It comes through great what, folks? Grace. The grace of God that anybody made it out of that wilderness when you look at what they did. No people had been more blessed than these Jews. And you can make the case, no people complained more than them either. Yes, you can make that case. Then the Lord said to Moses, behold, I will rain bread from the heavens for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may prove them, whether they will walk in my law or not. On the sixth day you shall prepare to bring in twice as much as they gather daily. So Moses and Aaron said to all Israel, at evening you shall know that the Lord has brought you out from the land of Egypt. Now there's more about this in the other books of the Pentateuch, but I'm just going through the Exodus record here. We won't get as far as I want to get with this. It says in the verse 7, and in the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord, for he hears your murmurings against the Lord. They murmured against Moses, and Moses said, no, you murmur against the Lord. It's not our leadership that you're not happy with, it's God's will. That's the problem. This is God's perfect will for you to be here and be hungry at this moment. This is his perfect one. You don't like it, so you blame us. So, they have a blessing here, and the blessing is, even though they are complaining, they are in what we call the geographical will of God. They left Egypt with Moses. They're where they're supposed to be at this moment, and they're going to be blessed, even though they're still complaining. Now, the thing is, God will hear their complaint, God will answer their prayer, and they will be blessed. But they're missing a much greater blessing. And this can be interesting. We can be complaining and worrying and blaming, and our prayer gets answered. We think, well, finally God did what I asked him to. And he's like, I had something much better for you. What if you had thanked God for that trial and not complained one moment and thank me for my provision ahead of time? Do you think I could not give you greater grace? And greatly, that's what they're missing. They're missing the greater blessing, but they're still getting a blessing. But not the one God wants them to have. He has much more for them that they're missing. Now, here's Moses reminding them who they're really complaining about. Exodus 16:8. And Moses said, This will happen when the Lord gives you in the evening flesh to eat, in the morning bread to the full, because the Lord has heard your grumblings which you murmur against him. What are we? Your murmurings are not against us, but against the Lord. And people need to understand this. It is human nature to find someone to blame. Whether you're a politician, a policeman, a housewife, homemaker, whatever you want to call, a businessman, an elder, a pastor, you want to fix blame on someone. It takes deep spirituality not to assign blame. I'm not going to blame anybody. God has me here, and God will deliver me. And God will work here. If you can do that, in a sense, you're really at that point a spiritual giant. You're over the first several hurdles. The devil has a whole slew of things that don't work on you anymore. It does say resist the devil and he will flee. If you do not murmur, not complain, not blame, leave him alone. He gets blessed every time I attack him. You can scare the devil off because his attacks backfire over and over again. It's better to leave that person alone and hope they backslide. Hope they get content. Hope they get, lukewarm. Because when I attack them, they excel. And we can be those kind of people. So this is understanding the warfare here. If you just don't do those, I won't complain. I won't place blame. I won't complain. I'll just thank God for it. That's like powerful. Simple thing, but it's powerful. Now, 3 verses that are coming into play here. As a New Testament believer, from these stories, we can see that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose. That promise is often not properly understood. It does not say that all things work together for everyone's good. All things work together for good to them who what? Love God. To the degree that you love God will be the degree that things work together to your good. So I want things to work together for my good. How do I love God so that they'll work together for my good? Jesus gives us the answer in John 14:15. If you love me, keep my commandments. The person who says, I love God and I cannot see God. He is invisible. But he has done things for me. And because I love him, I will keep his commandment. That's how I return the love of God. This is what he's done for me, and I appreciate it, so I will keep the commandment he's given me to do, whether I feel like it or not. When we do that, everything works together for our good. Now, the other way this verse works is God may take bad things to get you to the place where you are willing to keep his commandment so he can work those bad things together for your good. Even though when he starts working, you're not there yet. He gets you there through Romans 8:28. But we used to say, everything's going to work together for your good. Not if you keep complaining, not if you keep blaming, not if you keep murmuring. At some point they will not work together for your good. But if I love God enough to keep saying, I will keep your commandment, I will respond to your love that way, then we have this promise. And this takes us out of the negativity. Now, here's why these stories are so important with these 2 verses. 1 Corinthians 10:4 tells us that what happened to them in the wilderness was a lesson so that we won't make the same mistake. And they did all drink the same spiritual drink, for they drank of the spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. But with many of them God was not well pleased, for they were overthrown in the wilderness. They were given to murmuring, they were given to complaining, they were given to unbelief. They just could not simply seem to say, God has helped us in the past, he's going to help us now, and he'll help us in the future. They would not go from faith to faith, and there are examples. They were destroyed. They perished there. God was not, he saved them, if you will. The Red Sea speaks of water baptism. Because they were baptized unto Moses. They passed through the water. So it speaks of them being saved, having received salvation, being believers. But they never grew in that faith. And then what takes over now is a verse I use a lot. Romans 11:22. Behold, therefore, the goodness and severity of God. God had been good to them over and over and over again. And then suddenly, they start receiving the severity of God. So, you complain, God hears your prayer. You blame, God hears your prayer. You blame one time too long, and He begins the divine discipline process on you. And that's what happened to him in the wilderness. So, behold the goodness and what? Severity, in that order. He shows His goodness. If we respond to it, we continue in His goodness. If not, in Hebrews it says, He scourges every son whom He receives. That's severe. Scourging is intense. And the scourging is an act of discipline. Somehow, we did not respond to the goodness of God. It's there. We're ignoring it, or forgetting it, or I don't know, living in denial some way. Now, let's see. Just a couple of things. I mentioned, instead of complaining, we draw near to God when one cannot see the provision from God. That should be one of your prayers. God, I have no idea how you're going to take care of me here. I cannot see an answer, but I'm asking you to do it anyways. I'm believing you for it. I can't even begin to imagine it, God, but provide for me, take care of me. Change, give me a divine reversal, help me. And that pleases God. We believe in the character of God and the power of God, but we cannot see the provision of God. That's where He wants us to be. Those kinds of people get the greater grace. They get the full blessing. They get all things working together for their good because they what? They love God. And they respond to it by believing His promises. There are blessings God gives us when we complain about people or situation or trials. But there are much greater blessings which we will never know and never receive unless we stop complaining and start praising Him for our troubles. And start praying for Him for His wisdom, His direction, and provision in the midst of them. That's the lesson we're supposed to learn from these people. There was a provision over and over and over again. But then it would not believe God for it until divine discipline came upon them. And we'll see that. Now, we have two Christians. They are both facing very similar trials. One complains and criticizes, and the other praises God for the situation and prays for God's provision and help. I know Christians, I will not name their names, I will just not do that. But I know Christians who are stuck in a rut, and they still are bitter or unhappy about things that happened 20 years ago, and they have not grown in 20 years. They're still where they were. They still blame, they still complain, it's unfair. Never gotten over it. Never going to. It's like they're dying in the wilderness. It happens to people. And these are people with gifts and talents that could, they don't get over it. They don't go beyond that point. Take a look at that picture. So you should really get to know that picture very well. We have a hand grenade there and it's got a number on it. Complaint department, please take a number. You begin to complain, boom! That's the message we're trying to get across to you. Oh, one may forever seem to be stuck or even die in an unfortunate circumstances, while the other grows in grace and the knowledge of God. It moves on to greater things in many good works. It will happen. Now, finishing up here in 1 Corinthians 10, 1 through 3, then we'll take a break. Moreover, brethren, I would not that you should be ignorant how that all our fathers were under the cloud, and all passed through the sea. Who's he writing this to? What church? The church where? Is that a Jewish congregation or a Gentile congregation? Gentile. And he refers to this Jewish story about the people in the wilderness. Well, how did they know that? Paul had to teach them about the children of Israel going through the wilderness. When these Gentiles in Corinth became Christians, they knew nothing of these stories. So he had to teach them Old Testament stories to teach them what? New Testament principles. That's what we're doing with you. He had to do it with Corinth. We're doing it here in the thing called Bible Cup. We want you to, if you will, live by those testimonies. Right? Remember, Jesus did not come to, to violate or break the law or end it. He came to what? Fulfill it. So we're going to take those stories and we're going to get them right, even though they failed with them. So this is the storybook. This is the lesson book. So the Corinthians had to be taught these stories. And they were all baptized unto Moses in the cloud and in the sea, and did all eat the same spiritual meat. Let's see if I have them. Now, 1 Corinthians 10:6. I got to put this together and we stop. Now, these things were our examples. Life is too short to make all the mistakes yourself. It's a fatal thing. We do not have to reinvent the wheel or doing dumb things. We can learn from other people's dumb mistakes. I always tell the story of my brother watching me disobey my mom. She says, never put a knife or anything metal in an electrical outlet. And I thought that's ridiculous. So I took a kitchen knife and shoved it in that outlet. My brother watched me jump, and shake, and he never did it. He learned from my example. Well, we're supposed to learn from their bad examples. Good thing I'm alive today. Anyways, I can't. That knife can't hurt you. No way, Mom. Only make that mistake once. You either die or you live and never do it again. Now, these things were our examples to the intent we should not lust after evil things as they also lust. It goes on. But he's saying, learn from their mistakes which they made in the wilderness. That's what he spoke of. So, we're supposed to learn from any example in the Old Testament, but these are particularly pointed out because these are normal types of mistakes that everybody makes. And what they did, we do. And we have to learn from them to not make the same stupid mistake over and over again. Amen? All right, we'll get into some other things. Take a 10-minute break.